Hey folks, back again with another Steven Universe vlog. This is the new Lars and Beach City Drift. Two pretty decent episodes. The latter more than the former, but then you could probably predict I would think about that. I would think that because of Lars' episode. On the other hand, it's a Lars episode which barely has any Lars in it, so that's a big improvement over past Lars episodes. I like the confirmation that basically everyone kind of thinks Lars is a jerk. His friends, his parents. The bit where his parents, where his mom says, oh no, he's a burglar, and his dad says something along the lines of, we always were prepared for this day. Like, they knew that was the inevitable outcome of Lars's life. I like that the show's acknowledging that he's not really a good guy. Steven's incapable of acknowledging that. And it's possible that he'll change, of course, but the show's acknowledging that at least as he is now, not a good guy. What else? So Steven possessing Lars and then immediately going off to quote-unquote fix his life. It's a very Steven thing to do. It's very well-meaning, and it's also an absolutely terrible thing to do, which is kind of par for the course where Steven, Sadie, and Lars are concerned. Each of them has had a point where they trample over the consent of the others, either because they feel a need to, or because they think the other they know better than the other person what the other person wants. But there was the whole thing on the island where Sadie did it to Lars and Steven and stranded them there. There was Steven and the whole thing with the talent show or whatever it was, the performance that he was pushing Sadie to do with her mom. He with her mom was pushing Sadie to do. And I'm sure there's a time that Lars has done it to Steven. And now Steven's done it to Lars. And Lars is just consistently a jerk to Sadie. As kind of explored in this episode, where, she recognizes that he only wants to be her friend when other people aren't around. He doesn't want to be seen with her. And we see that in this episode. The way he reacts, like he looks at Sadie and then at all the other people being present, his friends, his family, all seeing him with Sadie, and he gets upset about it. And there's different ways to read that. Probably the most sympathetic would be that he does have feelings for Sadie, but he's uncomfortable displaying those feelings because they're not consistent with his self-image of, the cool kind of bad kid. So he's uncomfortable with them, especially in public. And, okay, but get over it. The other possibility, which I think is more likely because Lars is a jerk, is that he likes Sadie, but he recognizes that her social class within the hierarchy of Beach City teenagers is low. And so he doesn't want to be seen with her in public because he is trying to raise his social class to hang out with the cool kids. And that's, unfortunately, fairly common behavior, that the kids at the top of the social hierarchy are kind of more relaxed about it. Sometimes not. Sometimes the kid at the top is a terrible bully. But most of the time, the kids at the top of the social hierarchy are more relaxed about it. The kids at the bottom don't have any power. It's the kids in the middle who are awful to the kids below them, because they want to, they've got anxiety about their status because it's not at the top, and they want to assert their power over the kids lower down to make themselves feel better about that anxiety. And because, frankly, they enjoy it. Which I'll get into in the next episode. But as a general rule, kids aren't bullies, people aren't jerks because of some hidden inner pain. That's a myth propagated by the media. Certainly sometimes in a temporary way, people lash out because of a current issue, because their stress level is unusually high. But somebody who's day-to-day consistently awful, it's because that's their personality and that's what they like to do. It's because they like the feeling that it gives them. So I guess, that about sums up New Lars. Not a very interesting episode, except that, Steven hopefully has learned his lesson, but probably hasn't, about, possessing people is a creepy power. It's a really, really creepy power. And Steven's got to be real careful about using it against people's will. I wish to say he needs to never at all use it against people's will. Because that's just... Ooh. Hopefully he's at least somewhat learned his lesson. I'm doubtful that it's complete. I'm sure there'll be more problems in the future with him using that power. But we'll see. Hopefully he'll learn to have somewhat better control of it. Moving on to our Initial D episode. That was clearly a huge... I was hoping if I said huge enough I'd remember the word. I guess inspiration for this episode. This episode being Beach City Drift was Initial D. It could be generically any racing show or movie, but the reason I specify Initial D is because it very much feels like a sports anime, and Initial D is the big racing sports anime. The reason I say it feels like a sports anime is because you've got all the elements. You've got the person who has never done the game or sport or whatever it is before, and they're out of nowhere incredibly good at it, even though they have no knowledge, no opportunity to have built skills. Their very first time driving, which is what it was for Stevani, is a stretch even for that kind of anime. Usually there's some excuse for why the person has all these skills despite never having, for instance, car raced before. But honestly, it's not that much sillier. The guy who knows everything about the cars and strategies and the racing, but never really races himself, he just stands on the sidelines and announces to the other audience members and the audience what's going on. Probably most familiar to Americans in the form of Brock from Pokemon, but it's a very common thing in any kind of sports anime. Which, Pokemon is a weird hybrid of a few different genres, but one of them is definitely sports anime. And yeah, the character's role is to stand on the sidelines and explain things to the audience. And that's what, what's his name? Keep Beach City Weird guy. Blanking on his name, but that's what his role was. I'm pretty sure the thing where, like, sort of hyperspace-esque thing that happened to them when they were starting to defuse halfway through the race. I think something like that might have actually been a visual in Initial D. And of course the fact that somehow, despite stopping for like 2 minutes in the middle of the race, they're able to almost instantly catch up. That's a very sports anime thing to do. It's also a very video game thing to do. Rubber banding is a common mechanic in racing games. If you're not familiar with the term, it's basically anytime a car is off screen, either because it's so far ahead of you or so far behind you, the game will alter its speed so that the cars you can't see behind you are faster and the cars you can't see ahead of you are slower, and that serves to always keep the race close, hence making it more fun. Whereas in a real race, like, odds are pretty good somebody would be way out ahead of everybody else and some people would be way behind everybody else and there'd be a pack in the middle. Which you'll notice is very often what happens with like a multiplayer human game. If there's a notable skill difference between the players, the best player will be way out ahead of everyone else, and the worst player will be way out behind, and then there'll be a pack in the middle. But, I mean, the main focus of the episode was about Kevin, which, interesting choice of character to bring back. And I liked that Kevin's behavior is what in Stabani was treated as just completely without excuse. Because it is, you know. Somebody says no, leave them alone. Quit harassing them. But he's an entitled prick, and so he goes for the harassment. And in this episode we see more of how he's an entitled prick. He is, very full of himself, very completely infuriating. And I'm kind of on the episode's resolution. I mean, yeah, stop caring what the guy thinks and ignore him is great if you can, and it's great that Stevani did, but it's not always an option. Like, if Kevin had not left them alone after that, then they would have had to go to something else. Because that's not always going to work in real life at all. They're doing it to get a rise out of you. Well, no, they're not. In a sense they are, but no, they're not. When somebody is in any form engaged in bullying, which harassment is a form of bullying, what they're trying to do is position themselves as more powerful than you. And they're specifically trying to create a scenario where no matter what happens, they're more powerful than you. And so, yes, getting yourself into a position where they cannot harm you and cannot assert power over you is, generally speaking, the answer. But there's more than one way to do that, and different ways may not always work. If you're dealing with an internet troll, then block and forget is a pretty good strategy. In real life, that can sometimes work. But sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you ignore someone and they keep doing it, because the mere fact that you're not doing anything is enough for them to, it's enough to make them feel powerful because you're not hitting back. Sometimes hitting back is what makes them more powerful. And remember, the whole point is to create a scenario in which they get to feel more powerful no matter what happens. So the thing you have to do is not precisely ignore them, but stop caring whether they think they won. Focus on your own feelings and how to make yourself feel better. And that might be asserting power in your own way by not letting them harm you. That's what Steve and Connie do, but that's not always an option. Sometimes somebody gets under your skin. Somebody will know how to hurt you, or they'll be in a position of actual power and be able to actually harm you in some way, like a boss or an authority figure of some sort. And then just, that's not safe to ignore what they're doing, because they might escalate. And then you gotta find other ways. I feel like hammering over hard on the just ignore them button can be very dangerous. Because when I was a kid and getting bullied, that's the advice that I was given by my parents. Just ignore them. They're doing it to get a rise out of you. So I learned to close in on myself, not express my emotions, and hold deep down inside anything that hurt me. And 20 years later, God, more than 20, more like 25, between 20 and 25 years, later, I'm still in therapy. So, not always great advice, because ignoring them isn't always an option, and choking down your feelings to show no outward emotion can be more harmful than the bullies are. But striking back at them and playing their own game isn't a good idea either. The trick is to break out of the game entirely. But ultimately, the only reliable method of dealing with somebody who has power over you is to find a way to counteract their power with more power. And that could mean, the power of violence. That could mean getting some kind of authority figure on your side. That could mean any of a number of things. But very often that's the only way out. Steve and Connie are lucky in that Kevin's not around much. Kevin's easily flustered. Their strategy appears to have worked. So, good for them. It's not always going to work out like that for kids. And so I'm a little about the just ignore them. That said, I love the depiction of Kevin. And I love that they gave him this whole sob story and then that was completely made up. Because, like I was saying, that's true. People sometimes lash out because they're under a lot of stress. But generally speaking, that's temporary stress. Somebody who's like that all the time is like that all the time. It's got nothing to do with what kind of stress they're under. They're just not good people. This is, Kevin is like an internet troll or anybody who's just, like an asshole or a harasser. It's got nothing to do with feeling bad. It's got nothing to do with anything like that. he feels entitled. He does not care about the feelings of the people he's talking to. And he thinks it's funny. And that's not something that can be fixed. He's not someone who can be taught a lesson. Nor does it fall on anyone to teach him a lesson. Sooner or later, he's either going to learn to treat people better, or he will spend his whole life as Kevin, which is a fitting punishment. You know, punishment for being that kind of person is that you have to be that kind of person. And if he never comes to it on his own, well, outside people talking to him are never going to get through to him. So there's no real point in trying. Just, make it clear that he is unable to harm you and move on. And that's basically what Stevani do. Now, again, that's one method of doing it. There's other ways to render them unable to harm you. And once they recognize that they're unable to harm you, well, then you're not funny anymore. And they give up. Ignoring them isn't necessarily the best way, as I was saying. But that is ultimately all you can do, is just not play their game. So yeah. Decent episodes. Not the greatest, but alright. I mean, subpar episodes of Steven Universe are, as a general rule, still pretty amazing. I don't think there has yet been a bad episode that I can think of. Which this is, 3 seasons in, pretty good to still have no actually bad episodes. There's very few shows that can make that claim. Most of the shows I watch have at least a couple of terrible episodes in their first season when they're still getting their footing. Only show I can think of that made it 3 seasons with no bad episodes is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Actually, wait. I think Star Trek Deep Space Nine as well. I don't think the first truly bad... Well, no, that's not true. There are a couple in its first season. Yeah, it's really hard to come up with another show that has no bad episodes in its first 3 seasons. Maybe The West Wing, but I can't remember well enough. Parks and Recreation, the whole first season is bad. You really should just start with the second season. Yeah, I'm going through some of my favorite shows of the last couple decades and trying to think if there's anything else that has just no bad episodes for 3 entire seasons. And it's rare. It's really, really rare. Even Avatar: The Last Airbender had no bad episodes in its first 3 seasons, but about half the first season of Korra and most of the second season is bad. And those are essentially the same show. Basically, you can treat Korra as seasons 4 through 7 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else other than those 2 shows that made it 3 seasons. Anyway, yeah, still enjoying it, still looking forward to seeing more. So I'll see y'all next time. Bye!